overhauling a software application. Making such a decision, planning the solution, and finally implementing it successfully is not only one of the most time-consuming tasks in the IT business, but also one of the most complicated. Interestingly, the requests for refactorings and rewrites almost never come from the management, but from the development department. Well, actually, there are two reasons for this. Firstly, the topics are very tech-specific and primarily concern the development and work on the software, which is why management rightfully has relatively little knowledge and say. And secondly, the driver for the developers to foster a restructuring is a powerful one: pain. They are tired of working with old, slow, and unnecessarily complicated software and long for an improvement in their daily work. There's hardly a situation where a developer says, "We need to rewrite this only for the good of our clients." No, sir. They are sick of the old stuff. The problem is that nothing clouds judgment more than pain. Pain is one of the worst advisors for lengthy, complicated, and cool-headed and economic decisions. As you can see, refactorings and rewrites deserve a closer look. And this will await you in the next two episodes here. We take a close look at the side effects of restructuring and what most people overlook. We also look at the most important things you should have on your radar to avoid crucial mistakes. In the second episode, we look at how to make the whole thing decision ready for management. There's a lot of literature on this topic, and the terms are often used differently. So here's a brief clarification to make sure we're talking about the same thing. Refactoring involves making improvements or optimizations to the existing code without changing its external behavior or functionality. It's about cleaning up and simplifying code to make it easier to understand and maintain. A rewrite, on the other hand, involves replacing the existing codebase with a new one, potentially changing the technology, architecture, or even both. In short, refactoring is about improving code without changing what it does, while a rewrite involves starting from scratch or significantly altering the existing codebase to achieve a similar or improved functionality. This diagram is ideal for comparing the two approaches in an easily understandable way. It illustrates in a simple way in which situations refactoring is appropriate and when you should even think about a rewrite. The pure quality of source code is measured on the y-axis. The business value, i.e. the quality or modeling of the business logic, is measured on the x-axis. Of course, if the source code and business logic are of good quality, you don't have to do anything. This is the ideal case. Rare, but ideal. The classic case for technical refactorings is when the business logic is well implemented, but the quality of the source code or the technology used has become too old, or let's say too poor. You only make improvements to the existing code without changing the external behavior or functionality. There's also a less common case for refactorings. This is when the technical base and architecture are clean and future-proof, but the business logic is poorly implemented. That's the case when the creator of the application is not a code professional, but a domain expert, such as in research, where prototypes eventually become scalable applications, and no one but the domain experts touches the business logic black box. And that's a Disneyland for fans of nested if and switch statements. Another scenario is that the business evolves or even changes significantly, e.g. for legal reasons, and you are forced to make major changes to the business logic. However, if both the code and the business logic are of poor quality, there's little point in keeping the application. If there's nothing you want to protect, then you don't need to keep it. In this case, a rewrite makes sense, where you start from scratch with new requirements. I don't want to go into technical discussions of the two approaches in this episode. My aim is rather to convey a feeling for the consequences that you will face if you decide to take such a step. To evaluate refactorings or rewrites responsibly and communicate them clearly to decision makers, reluctance to work with a legacy system should really not be the driving factor. There are a lot of other things to consider. Statistically speaking, the chances of success with refactorings and rewrites are relatively low because they are enormously complicated undertakings that are often not thought about realistically. In the end, management says that the developers were incompetent, and the developers will say that they didn't get a proper vision. So Same old story. Here are the top 5 reasons for failure from tech side. Why don't you take each point from that list and ask yourself on a scale from 1 to 10 how sure you are about it? Underestimating complexity and familiarity. Engineers often assume that the existing codebase is more complicated than necessary and believe that rewriting or refactoring will simplify things. There's a tendency to believe that understanding the current application's flaws will make building a new version straightforward. However, this underestimates the depth of knowledge embedded in the existing code, including undocumented behaviors and solutions for obscure requirements. The silver bullet syndrome. The belief that a new technology, framework, or architecture will solve all current problems can be enticing. However, no new technology is a panacea, and new choices come with their own sets of challenges and limitations. While modern best practices and design patterns are valuable, there's sometimes an assumption that applying them will automatically result in superior software. However, these practices need to be adapted to the specific context of the application and do not guarantee success on their own. Assuming perfect execution. There's often an assumption that the rewrite or refactoring process will be executed flawlessly, without the setbacks and compromises that affected the original code. This time we will make it better than the guys before us. Come on. Assume they also tried hard and realize that you contributed to the chaos of legacy code yourself. Underestimating the value of existing code. Existing code, even if messy, represents a significant investment in understanding and solving the domain's problems. Rewriting or heavily refactoring can discard valuable insights and solutions that have been battle tested over time. Just realize the amount of time and effort that was invested to create the status quo. Not willing to go the distance. There's often the expectation that a rewrite will complete it quickly because the team already knows what the software needs to do. Well, this underestimates the time required to reach feature parity with the original application, and let alone innovate beyond it. And suddenly, the enthusiasm from early days becomes hard work, and after time, the motivation disappears. Ask experienced architects for their opinion. In any case, I've never met anyone, and I repeat, never, who claims that refactorings or rewrites are a piece of cake. It will definitely be a pain in the ass,
Pizza.
for sure. You're only in this situation because you've done a lot of things wrong, period. And you will continue to do things wrong, so please never promise that everything will be better afterwards. If you're proposing a restructuring, you need to be able to identify strategies to avoid becoming a victim of the top 5 we just mentioned, because they are common setbacks that all teams will have to face. Here's my most important piece of advice for you, even before you start actively working on your application. Avoid making the same mistakes again at all costs. So don't just look at the current problems, but look at the error chain, the cause of the problems. What actually led to the application being in this current state? Poor requirements, poor planning, poor processes, too few skills in the team, no testing, no code philosophy, whatever. Analyze exactly what the causes are and make sure you can eliminate them. All else is madness. Another important piece of advice is that you need a team that has the skills for such a challenge. This requires very good craftsmanship. If the team has no idea about design patterns, clean code, and does not rigorously follow the same code style, there will not be a serious professional technical improvement, because that wouldn't make sense, would it? If you are proposing a major restructuring to management, you should first make sure that you have done your homework from a tech perspective. Check off the common mistakes and the no-brainers, otherwise every consultant will tear you apart. And that is usually what happens. Management will probably hire a consultant to check if you are up for the task. So, what is the most important prerequisite for the success of a technical refactoring? What do you think, huh? It's the test coverage. Without complete test coverage of the business logic, how can you guarantee that your refactoring will do what it is supposed to do afterwards? So, no tests, no refactoring. A farmer's wisdom says that refactoring should no longer be carried out from around 40% technical debt, or relative technical debt. This is particularly relevant in projects. What does this mean? Okay, for example, If it took 100 days to complete a project, but another 40 days would be needed to complete it properly, then we are talking about 40% relative technical debt. You should have figures like this to hand. You also need to have a current strategy for branching. Refactoring will happen in a separate branch. So, how do you make sure that the new features are also implemented in that branch without having to implement and maintain them twice? Don't say that there will simply be no new features during refactoring. And finally, the top 5 from just now essentially have to do with employee morale during a long and hard refactoring. Finding a strategy to make the workload bearable for the team and keep morale high is a real challenge and cannot be solved by the technology alone. Get help from HR department, borrow their wisdom, or even ask for a coach. When new technologies come into play, you must be able to justify why they were chosen. You are also responsible for the quality and future viability of the technologies. Don't forget that there is also a responsibility for the team. You need answers to the questions. Does the team agree with the new technologies? Can they handle it? And how difficult is it to find new staff for it, i.e., how many people out there can actually master the technology and how much do they cost? And don't run into that common problem that you have one or few super advocates for a new technology that pretty soon later leave the company and you're left with their technology. Then another classic no-brainer question would be, did you really document and reevaluate all features from the old application? I mean, can you guarantee that you are not throwing away hidden treasures? You never want customers saying, why did they leave out this feature? It was one of the things I liked most. And probably your answer would be, oh, we just forgot. Another aspect, it is very likely that the new application will have teething problems. And nothing is more painful to sell than things that no longer work, even though they did once. People have no patience with hygiene issues such as login errors, buggy emails, strange crashes, and so on, no matter how good the new features are. Imagine a Formula One car that is much faster than its competition, but it barely finishes a race because it breaks down all the time due to smaller issues. What will people actually talk about? The super fast engine or the unnecessary issues? There's no cure to this, only the right attitude. If you want to get back to winning as soon as possible, just like the Formula One engineers, you have to put in the extra shifts to fix the annoying issues. So be prepared for small, annoying bugs to get a lot more attention than your new great features. Outline the reasons and the expected effects why you want to refactor or rewrite. What are you trying to accomplish? Then identify how far your current software is from those goals. Make it as detailed as possible. As I said, we have only looked at the technical perspective so far. If you don't have a handle on the issues raised today, or at least have the arguments to explain and back them up, then you don't need to approach management at all. That's the least you need to be able to show. In the next episode, however, we will go beyond technology. We will look at the things that are relevant to the decision for or against restructuring from a management's perspective. So, see you later.